Greenwald. I'm pleased to chair the first panel this morning, which is on the transformation of American law firms from the fraternal to business model. And this will be followed by a second panel on transformation continued. So we will continue. We have a very distinguished panel here with us this morning, and we'll get right to it. And our first speaker is Stephen Flanders, who's an independent scholar. His topic for this morning will be Pathways to the Mainstream from the History of the New York County Lawyers Association. And Steve is a polymath, I understand, and he has just published a book called Celebrating the Courthouse, which is about court architecture, with an introduction by Justice Stephen Breyer. So, Stephen?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. This has been an extraordinary event. Being neither Jewish nor a lawyer, I've been asked by several people what I'm doing here. But the short answer is, anytime Mark Galander tells me that I want to do something, I do it, and he's always right, as indeed he was in this instance. This has been a great pleasure, and I want to, again, to thank the many organizers of this excellent event. So I approach the subject of this conference and of this paper with some diffidence, but there may be advantages to the perspective of a relative outsider. In the course of my research for a projected centennial history of the New York County Lawyers Association, which Fordham will bring out next year, I've been often struck by the degree that perceptions of outsiders of New York's once closed legal establishment seem unidimensional. Often, indeed, characterizations I encounter seem closer to the realm of caricature than to the sort of nuanced description that almost any corner of New York's complex social history deserves. This is anything but surprising. If doors are closed, a perspective from outside the door is not ideal for figuring out what's going on the other side of the door. A notable example appears in Norman Dawson's characterization of Justice John Marshall Harlan, for whom he served as a law clerk at the Supreme Court. Early in Harlan's career on the court, when he was fresh from a career as a lion of the New York bar. Harlan's biographer quotes Professor Dawson at length near the start of an epilogue. Not a New Yorker himself, professor and biographer Tinsley Yarbrough relies on Dawson to set the stage for him. Harlan was part of the establishment, as close to an upper-class justice as we've had since Charles Evans Hughes. Dawson then goes on, in rather obvious ways, to characterize Harlan as the quintessential Wall Street lawyer, which he certainly was, at least for his own generation, thereby leaving the plain impression that the conservative instincts of his mentor, they don't want to rock the boat, he says, faithfully reflected the class of such as Harlan and Hughes, presumably old New Yorkers. Of course, it's anything but surprising that Harlan, seen from the perspective of a law clerk, seemed a quintessential representative of New York's upper-class establishment. Harlan's world of white shoe law firms and clubs, most probably closed to Jews at the time, must certainly have seemed a thing apart. But that said, Dawson's view can be made sense of only if we regard his characterization as a bit of legalistic sophistry. Hughes and Harlan were the closest we've had, perhaps, but they actually weren't very close at all. To begin with Hughes, his father had arrived in the New World only 6 years before his birth, entirely with resources, relatives, or connections. By the time his only child was born, Reverend David Charles Hughes had secured a couple of modest posts with country churches in Glens Falls and Sandy Hill, now Hudson Falls, New York. Eventually, with several stops along the way, he found his way to Great Jones Street, a few blocks from here, and then to Green Point across the East River and not yet part of the city. Charles Evans Hughes was indeed a sort of dynastic figure, but only because he helped to found the dynasty. His name comes down to us, of course, via the firm of Hughes, Hubbard & Reed, and via his son, Charles Evans Hughes, Jr. I've been asked, by the way, if there's another father-son pairing that have served as presidents of major bar associations as those two did of county lawyers, and I don't know of any. Harlan, yes, was a Wall Street lawyer, But as we shall see, he shared with most of that breed of the generations preceding the fact that he only became a New Yorker once attracted here as an exciting place to practice law. In this, he follows people like Emory Buckner, who, his partner, who came here after Harvard Law School. Buckner was, as you may know, from Iowa via rural Nebraska. He only came here because Felix Frankfurter suggested it, his lifelong friend. Harlan's illustrious grandfather was, of course, a Kentuckian, where he had served as Attorney General, as unsuccessful candidate for governor, and as unsuccessful aspirant for various cabinet posts in Washington before his appointment to the Supreme Court. John Maynard Harlan, son of one justice and the father of the other, was a Chicago lawyer of some prominence but highly uneven professional success. The family's finances were, most of the time, precarious. So it seems a bit of a stretch to describe the younger Justice Harlan as upper class at all. In any case, he certainly was not a representative of old money New York. I press this distinction because mixed histories of this kind seem to have been the norm, not the exception, at least until recently. The best frame of reference that I can come up with for today in honor of the season is Tim McCarver, whose career might in a way resemble that of John W. Davis. Tim McCarver, as you may know, grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, made it big in St. Louis. When he retired as a ball player, he came to start a new career. He is at this time broadcasting his 17th straight World Series, a record, and he's been described by no less an authority than Roger Angell of The New Yorker as the preeminent sportscaster of our day. So John W. Davis could be called the Tim McCarver of the legal world, and this is a far more typical kind of a history. It struck me as I came in this morning that a real measure of the disconnect between old money New York and white shoe law firm practice is the complete absence, near complete, of Dutch names in the white shoe firms. Where is the firm of Beekman, Van Wyck, Roosevelt, and Vanderbilt? There is no such firm, and those names don't show up in the names of any of the firms. And I can't, off the top of my head, since this only occurred to me this morning, I haven't had a chance to look this up, but I can't think of a Dutch name in any of the old New York firms, in their names, I mean. Which is not to say that there were no members of those families who practiced law at all. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a member of the New York County Lawyers Association, but only for 7 years before he was elected president and made an honorary member, and he didn't have much to do with the outfit. And of course, he barely practiced law at all. Among the dozens of notable lawyers who helped found the New York County Lawyers Association, or important in its early years, hardly any were natives of New York. Moreover, most of those few were Jewish. And even there, many of the most important among Jewish founders were born in some faraway small city in America. Hardly any, notably, were born outside the United States. More typical were George Gordon Battle, who was born in rural North Carolina, Joseph H. Choate of Salem, Massachusetts, John Kirkland Clark of Springfield, Massachusetts, and so on through the alphabet to Archibald R. Watson of Holly Springs, Mississippi. County Lawyers numbers among its early presidents and other major figures 3 major party nominees for President of the United States, the aforementioned Charles Evans Hughes of Glens Falls, or Alton B. Parker of Cortland and Esopus, New York, and John W. Davis of Clarksburg, West Virginia, who actually represented that state in the U.S. House of Representatives, among other notable offices, before coming to New York and helping to found the law firm that still carries his name.